What exactly is Brics? Well, the term was originally coined in 2001 by English economist Jim O'Neill, also called Baron O'Neill of Gatley, a man who wrote his thesis and titled it An Empirical Investigation into OPEC's Surplus and Its Disposal before he graduated in 1982. He then joined the Swiss Bank Corporation in 1988 and became the chief of global research there. Then he joined Goldman Sachs in 1997 and was appointed head of global research in 2001. Later becoming the head of Goldman Sachs' division of asset management in 2010, where he personally managed $800 billion in assets. In other words, he is an incredibly credible person, and his prediction was, to be put simply, that by 2050, Brazil, Russia, India, and China would be among the dominant economies of the world. 8 years later, these same 4 countries joined arms and created Brics, followed by South Africa only a year later. Since then, Brics has evolved dramatically from an idea that these countries would beat the G7 by 2050 to a joint effort by these very same countries to decouple their economies from Western influence in 2009. But what exactly is Brics, and what is important to know about them? Well, they are an organization with no permanent leadership structure. What this means is they have a rotating chairmanship that changes annually, and the country that is serving as the chair is in charge of organizing summits, coordinating meetings, and driving the agenda for that year. In 2024, Russia holds this position. They have also created their own versions of the World Bank, which under Indian chairmanship was officially discussed at the BRICS Summit of 2022, and then finally implemented in 2015 as the BRICS Bank, now called the New Development Bank, currently headquartered in China with offices in South Africa, Brazil, India, and Russia, with it releasing its first financial bond using the RMB, the Chinese currency, in 2016. Going back to the present, Russia has had an incredibly busy year this year, organizing over 200 events, from the BRICS Games to scientific collaborations and the BRICS Summit that will occur October 22nd through 24th, and many more events. But the most important event by far is going to be the BRICS Summit that I just mentioned. But before I get there, why would Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia join BRICS? Well, the reason is geopolitical risks of increasing economic sanctions from North America and Europe. For reference, half of the Russian central banks' gold and forex reserves were frozen in 2022, and the West cut them off from the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, commonly called SWIFT. Many BRICS nations also have sanctions against them alongside this. In November 2023, an article posted on a leading Chinese Communist Party political journal stated that the recent United States monetary choices created a dollar tide that seizes the wealth of other countries and forces developing countries to bear the huge economic losses and financial risks brought about by the hegemony of the dollar. Meanwhile, India's central bank in 2023 argued that there is an inherent defect of the global dollar's role, whereby the weakening of the United States economy results in disorder and disproportionate losses outside the United States. Which, as the article then points out, is significant because Argentina, Egypt, and Ethiopia were facing severe dollar shortages and hyperinflation at the time of August 2023. BRICS meeting, and only one of those countries invited to the BRICS organization declined the invite, that nation being Argentina, which created its own solution, which deserves a video all on its own. But in short, the reasons for countries joining BRICS is because of sanctions, dollar shortages, inflation, and unprecedented rises in interest rates. It can also be assumed based on this that getting an invitation to these meetings demonstrates a high likelihood of said country joining, which raises up the next important question: who is going to join BRICS next? Well, Algeria, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Belarus, Bolivia, Indonesia, Cuba, Democratic Republic of Congo, Gabon, Venezuela, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Laos, Myanmar, Bahrain, and Mauritania. So at the minimum, there are 20 confirmed countries joining BRICS during or after the annual BRICS summit occurring October 22nd through 24th in Kazan, Russia. However, this is only the minimum. Remember how I mentioned the BRICS games? Well, during the 12 days it went on for, there were 82 countries that participated in the games. This being said, to assume all 82 countries that had athletes compete in the games are going to join is asinine. The United Kingdom, Italy, Hungary, Lithuania, Switzerland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Israel, Argentina, Serbia, Japan, and South Korea are not at all likely to join in the foreseeable future. Even if they attended the games, these nations are within the groups of the G7, NATO, and the EU, and are heavily considered to be members of or have ties to the very organizations that BRICS is trying to decouple from, or have publicly denied claims that they will join in the cases of Argentina and Serbia. So 82 subtracted by 13 is 69 countries.
Nice.
At the maximum, joining the BRICS organization on October 22nd, or within 6 months after. This lines up with the claims that South Africa was making in 2023, stating that 40 plus countries are seeking to join, as at the time, BRICS only had 5 member states, and that would bring the alliance to 45 members, with the article stating over 40 countries including Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Argentina, Algeria, Bolivia, Indonesia, Egypt, Ethiopia, Cuba, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Comoros, Gabon, and Kazakhstan have expressed interest in joining the forum, according to 2023 Summit Chair South Africa. Of those 45 nations, 5 joined in January, and while the extent of Saudi Arabia's involvement doesn't seem clear on the surface, they are on official maps of the BRICS organization as a member state, and Russia is the current chair of BRICS. So Russia is saying they are members even though Saudi Arabia hasn't publicly stated they are themselves at the time of writing this, which is very confusing, but perhaps they are also trying to position themselves in both the BRICS and Western financial systems at the same time. Algeria has joined the New Development Bank officially prior to being admitted to the BRICS organization as well. So perhaps there's some premature publication going on here. But returning back to the BRICS summit, what is supposed to be discussed? Well, according to Russian news agency TASS, they have confirmed a list of projects, a common unit of account unit, a platform for international settlements in BRICS digital currencies, Bridge, a payment system, Pay, a settlement depository, Clear, an insurance system, Insurance, and a BRICS rating alliance. But most importantly of this, they have stated that the unit project is going to peg the common unit of account to 40% of the value of gold and use a basket of BRICS national currencies to solve the problem of exchange rate volatility. And the key principle of this new financial system is decentralization, the use of digital technologies, and BRICS will be using blockchain technology. For reference, the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944 introduced the world to a global monetary system that introduced the dollar as the reserve currency for 44 countries and made it so $35 could be redeemable for 1 ounce of gold. This ended under President Nixon in 1971, and in 1971 and 73, agreements were made to make it so OPEC oil sales, as a general rule, would use dollars for oil sales. Because the United States supported Israel, however, during the Yom Kippur War, an embargo was placed on the United States, and then in 1974, a deal was struck with Saudi Arabia where they would use petrodollars to purchase US treasuries. In 2003, the European Union struck a deal with Iran that required Iranian oil to be paid with euros when exporting to Asia and Europe. By 2016, many OPEC nations were adversely impacted by the shale oil boom in the United States, and these countries were Russia, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Venezuela, and Nigeria, countries mentioned previously in this video. In 2018, Venezuela launched a cryptocurrency called Petro, backed by the government's oil and mineral reserves, while also circumventing US sanctions, though it had limited success. This further proves demand for an alternative. Speaking on currency alternatives, and with BRICS seeing so much attention, it should be no surprise that Zimbabwe, the same country that became a textbook case for hyperinflation, is creating a gold-backed digital currency called the ZiG. And currently, 85% of transactions take place using US dollars, with African nations having created the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System developed by African Union and African Export-Import Bank, a centralized solution they hope creates near-instant payments in local currency without converting to foreign currency or a third party. So, an alternative to SWIFT outside of Brics itself. Unless Brics doesn't allow countries to use other payment systems, this demonstrates a high likelihood of these very countries also joining Brics. If we then take this into account and combine it with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is an organization began by China in 2013, enhanced global trade, economic integration, and infrastructure development. Notably, this project has given China control over many infrastructure projects, especially ports in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Greece, Djibouti, Kenya, Myanmar, alongside railways in Ethiopia, Djibouti, Nigeria, Laos, and a dry port in Kazakhstan. The names of these countries should be familiar at this point of the video. However, the point more important is the sheer amount of countries participating in the Belt and Road Initiative. That number is 146 to 151, depending on who you ask. If you remember, I said a maximum of 69 countries will be members of the Brics organization in October or 6 months after, with 20 countries at the minimum joining the bloc. So, at the minimum, Brics Plus will have 30 member nations, only 14 less than the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944. At the same time, Brics is creating a currency backed 40% by gold and 60% by a mix of national currencies associated with Brics. For reference, Russia has increased its gold purchases from 1.112 billion rubles per day to 8.2 billion per day, where the gold purchased is then transported to Hong Kong and then deposited in local bank accounts, demonstrating an increase in demand for gold. Meanwhile, China bought gold for 18 consecutive months and was the largest buyer of gold in 2023. This demonstrates actions being taken to back the new currency by gold. So, Brics has evolved a lot since O'Neill coined the term in 2001. It went from being an idea that Brazil, Russia, China, and India would become dominant powers by 2050 to these very same countries linking arms to create the BRIC organization in 2009, later being joined by South Africa the next year to create Brics. They are seeking a multipolar order, which in all honesty, if I was them, I would be doing too. In a single meeting, that number doubled to 10. After this next meeting, or shortly after the number of countries joining, at the bare minimum, will double, bringing the total to a minimum of 30 countries, with a maximum of 69 countries joining the bloc organization in the near future. They already control 44% of the oil supply, 45% of the global population, and 28% of the global economy. They are stockpiling gold reserves, and as a side point, China has invested in Bitcoin mining infrastructure in Ethiopia, using a hydrogen-powered dam they also control themselves. Additionally, El Salvador also is expressing interest in Brics, and Russia passed legislation to allow crypto payments for the use in international trade. So perhaps there is a small chance that some amount of Bitcoin could wind up backing the new Brics currency, though that's a topic for another video as it hasn't even been mentioned. But all this being said, what are the ramifications of this new currency pegged to gold, alongside between 30 and 69 countries being member nations of Brics in the near future? Well, it will likely trigger a market crash the moment it is legitimized, and then shortly after, inflation will begin to rise as dollars that aren't demanded by Brics nations anymore are being reduced or removed entirely from the central bank balance sheets. For reference, China has $3.288 trillion worth of assets and reserves as of August 2024. 300 billion of Russian assets are still frozen. Meanwhile, there are articles talking about India's forex reserves hitting an all-time high, with that number of being the USD equivalent of 666.85 billion USD, even though India is actively de-dollarizing and is the second largest buyer of gold this year behind Turkey. Brazil has $330 billion worth of USD. And to further illustrate the last point, the dollar only made up 80% of Brazil's reserves, and the yuan overtook the euro in 2022. When it comes to Brazil's forex reserves, combine this with the fact that Brazil now banned X, and you can safely assume the dollar is less than 80% of Brazil's reserves now. Thus, de-dollarization efforts are currently happening, and in my opinion, what is going on is very much something that can be best described as a black swan for the Western world. October 22nd through 24th is very close to the presidential election occurring on November 5th, and inauguration day is January 20th. Remember, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the UAE joined in January 2024 after attending the Brics summit that August prior. The countries joining this year participated in the Brics Games that occurred June 12th through 23rd. The event was used as a platform to get support for Brics, which makes sense. This corresponds to the same length of time as the last wave of new members joining. So in all, Brics Plus already controls 44% of the world's oil reserves. Its members are building gold stockpiles. It has 45% of the world's population, 28% of the global economy, and there are at the minimum 20 members joining, with a maximum of 69 total members in the near future. At the same time, Brics has stated this meeting will be where they will be releasing their gold-backed alternative to the SWIFT payment system. This has all the characteristics of a black swan if I've ever seen one, especially since mainstream media hasn't been covering the issue. If they did, perhaps the markets could price it in prior to the Brics summit in October. This would lessen the blow of the impending crash that will occur, and then, following after this, a period of high inflation and a very slim chance of hyperinflation if the blow is all at once, which is the worst case scenario for the American economy. Like, subscribe, and comment if you wish. Don't forget to live long and prosper.